Christmas Eve, 2024. The smell of cinnamon still hung in the air from cookies we'd baked that morning. Snowflakes drifted past the window where our tree stood, lights twinkling softly. My husband stood by the front door, his coat already buttoned, one hand resting on a suitcase I'd never seen before. Our two children clutched their Christmas stockings, eyes wide with confusion. Then he spoke four words that shattered everything. "She's coming. You leave." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the living room we'd decorated together 3 days earlier, staring at a man whose face I no longer recognized. My daughter, 7 years old, tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, where are we going? Santa knows we live here." My son, barely 5, looked between his father and me, trying to understand why Christmas was suddenly breaking apart. My husband didn't even look at them. He checked his watch like we were keeping him from something important, something more valuable than the family he'd built over 12 years of marriage. The hallway light cast shadows across his face as he repeated himself, slower this time, as if I hadn't understood. "Pack what you need. She'll be here in an hour." Not "I'm sorry." Not "we need to talk." Just a cold, administrative dismissal, like I was a tenant whose lease had expired. I felt my hands go numb. The Christmas carols playing from our speaker suddenly felt obscene, mocking. Silent night. Holy night. All is calm. All is bright. Nothing was calm. Nothing was bright. This was the man who'd promised to love me forever, who'd held my hand through 2 difficult pregnancies, who'd whispered that I was his everything on our wedding day. Questions flooded my mind so fast I couldn't catch them all. Who was this woman who had enough power over him to make him throw away his family on Christmas Eve? When had this started? How long had I been living a lie, smiling at breakfast, making love to a stranger, planning holidays with someone who was already gone? My husband straightened his collar in the hallway mirror, and that's when I noticed. New cologne, a watch I'd never seen, shoes that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. He looked different, carried himself different, like he'd stepped into someone else's life and it fit him better than ours ever had. He kept glancing at his phone, a slight smile tugging at his lips. Someone was texting him. Someone who made him feel important, desired, powerful. Someone who apparently mattered more than the children asking why Daddy wanted them to leave their home on Christmas. I wanted to ask him everything. I wanted to demand answers, explanations, some shred of the man I'd married. But the coldness in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He'd already left us long before tonight. The question that burned brightest in my mind wasn't who she was. It was simpler than that, and somehow more devastating. When did I stop being enough? Let me pause here for a second because I need you to understand what's about to unfold. If you're watching this story, I want you to subscribe to Folktale Stories right now. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one, like this video. And please, before we continue, comment your country below. Let me know where you're watching from. It means so much to me to know who's hearing my story. Let me take you back, because betrayal doesn't happen in a single night. It builds slowly, in moments you don't recognize until you're looking at them through the lens of hindsight. We met in 2012, both young professionals trying to make it in the city. He was charming, ambitious, still figuring out his career path. I was already climbing my ladder, but I kept that part of my life quiet. I'd learned early that some men feel diminished by a woman's success, so I downplayed my achievements. I never corrected people who assumed he was the primary breadwinner. I never mentioned my promotions at dinner parties. I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. When he lost his job in 2015, I carried us financially for 18 months. I paid the mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards. I held him when he cried about feeling like a failure, told him his worth wasn't defined by a paycheck. When he finally landed a decent position, I celebrated like it was my own victory. Maybe that was my first mistake, making his dreams more important than acknowledging my own. Our children came next, and I watched him transform into a father who seemed present, loving, engaged. He coached our son's little league team. He attended our daughter's dance recitals. From the outside, we looked perfect. Sunday morning pancakes, family movie nights, annual trips to the lake house. But something shifted about 2 years ago. He started working later. New gym membership he never mentioned needing before. Suddenly interested in fashion, in networking events, in conversations that seemed to exclude me. His phone became an extension of his hand, always face down on the table, always password protected. When I asked about his day, his answers grew vague, dismissive. The intimacy between us didn't disappear all at once. It evaporated slowly, like water left out in the sun. By the time I noticed the glass was empty, I couldn't remember when it had last been full. Christmas morning 2024 started like any other. Our children woke us before dawn, electric with excitement about presents under the tree. I made coffee while they tore through wrapping paper, their laughter filling the house. My husband sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, barely watching. At 10 a.m., he stood abruptly. "I need to talk to you." Privately, we went to the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, like he was about to discuss weekend plans instead of detonating our entire life. "I've been seeing someone," he said flatly. "It's serious. More serious than this." He gestured vaguely toward the living room, toward the sound of our children playing. "She's successful. She has her life together. She makes me feel like I matter." I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should turn off the coffee maker, that it might burn if left on too long. "What about our family?" I finally managed to say. He shrugged. Actually shrugged. "The kids will adjust. You'll be fine. You've always been fine." There was something in his tone when he said that last part. Resentment, maybe even contempt. As if my ability to handle things, to stay strong, to keep our family afloat when he was struggling, had somehow become a fault instead of a virtue. Then came the detail that made everything click into place. She's well connected. Important people know her name. Being with her opens doors I never even knew existed. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about love or attraction. This was about status, about what he thought she could give him that I couldn't. Access, prestige, a version of himself he liked better. He announced she'd be spending Christmas with him. In our home. In the space we'd built together. And for that to happen, we needed to leave. My daughter appeared in the doorway, her new teddy bear tucked under her arm. "Daddy, are you coming to see my new toys?" He didn't even look at her. "Not now, sweetheart. Daddy's busy." She stood there, waiting for him to change his mind, to scoop her up like he used to. He checked his watch instead. "If you're still watching, comment, 'I'm still watching.'" Some truths take time to reveal. I packed 3 suitcases in 20 minutes while he watched from the doorway, making sure I didn't take anything he deemed his. Our children kept asking questions I couldn't answer. Why are we leaving? When are we coming back? Did we do something wrong? I knelt down and looked into their confused little faces, trying to find words that wouldn't break them. "We're going on an adventure." I lied, my voice somehow steady. "Just for a little while." We ended up at my sister's house 40 minutes away. She answered the door in her pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled us inside without questions. Her guest room became our refuge that Christmas night. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching my children sleep, their faces peaceful despite the chaos. My phone kept buzzing, emails I'd been ignoring for days because of the holiday. Work seemed irrelevant when your marriage was collapsing, when your entire life was being packed into suitcases and hauled out into the snow. But sometime around midnight, unable to sleep, I opened my inbox. There were the usual end-of-year reports, budget approvals, meeting requests. Then I saw a name that made my blood run cold. The sender was my executive assistant, forwarding information about a personnel issue that needed my attention after the holiday. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding relationship between employee Jessica Morgan and external consultant." Jessica Morgan. The name my husband had whispered on a phone call 2 weeks ago when he thought I was in the shower. The name I'd seen flash across his screen before he quickly turned his phone face down. The pieces started assembling themselves in my mind like a puzzle I'd been staring at for months without seeing the full picture. I opened my laptop and pulled up our company directory. There she was, Jessica Morgan, Senior Marketing Director. Hired 8 months ago. Impressive resume. Confident smile in her profile photo. And according to the email thread, currently under informal investigation for inappropriate conduct with a vendor whose name wasn't disclosed in the message to protect privacy during the preliminary review. The day after Christmas, I had a previously scheduled meeting with my executive team. Annual review planning, budget allocations for the new year. The kind of meeting that happens regardless of personal catastrophes because business doesn't pause for broken hearts. I walked into our headquarters that morning feeling hollow but steady. My assistant gave me a sympathetic look. Word had somehow gotten around that I'd spent Christmas at my sister's house, though no one knew why. The boardroom filled slowly. Department heads, senior directors, legal counsel. I sat at the head of the table reviewing notes, trying to focus on quarterly projections instead of the fact that my marriage had ended 3 days ago. Then she walked in, late, as usual, according to the attendance notes I'd reviewed. Jessica Morgan swept into the room with the kind of confidence that borders on arrogance, designer bag over her shoulder, expensive heels clicking against the floor. She was laughing at something someone had said, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who believes they're untouchable. She found a seat halfway down the table and finally looked up toward the front of the room. Our eyes met. I watched, in real time, as recognition moved across her face like a shadow. The confident smile faltered. Her face went pale. She glanced around the room as if looking for an exit, but there was nowhere to go. Everyone was settling in, opening laptops, pouring coffee. My executive assistant began the meeting. Thank you all for being here. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that all statements made by our CEO are considered official company direction. She gestured toward me. Ms. Richardson has several important announcements regarding personnel and policy changes for the new year. I let the silence stretch for just a moment, watching Jessica Morgan's hands tremble slightly as she reached for her water glass. Then I began the meeting, professional and composed, discussing performance metrics and strategic goals. But the power in that room had shifted so completely, so irrevocably, that everyone could feel it even if they didn't understand why. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. I didn't acknowledge her directly, didn't need to. By the time we adjourned, 3 people had approached me privately to discuss concerns about her conduct. Apparently, her relationship with my husband, the external consultant she'd been using company time and resources to meet with, had not gone unnoticed by her colleagues. The investigation my assistant had mentioned wasn't just beginning. It had been building for weeks. I could have destroyed her that day, could have made a scene, confronted her publicly, used my position to ensure she never worked in our industry again. But here's what I learned in that moment. Standing in the boardroom where I'd built my career through years of hard work and integrity, revenge is exhausting, and I was already tired. Instead, I let the process unfold naturally. HR completed their investigation. She was terminated 3 weeks later for ethics violations, not because of me, but because of her own choices. My husband called me during that time, his voice different now, uncertain, almost pleading. She'd ended things, he said. Realized the situation was too complicated. Realized she'd misread what he could offer her. He wanted to talk about reconciliation, about counseling, about how we could fix this. I listened until he finished, then said something I'd been practicing. I spent 12 years making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. I'm done shrinking. The divorce was finalized by spring. I kept the house, got primary custody, rebuilt my life with my children at the center of it. We created new Christmas traditions, ones that didn't include walking on eggshells or pretending everything was fine. My daughter asked me once, about 6 months later, if I was sad Daddy didn't live with us anymore. I thought about it carefully before answering. I'm sad about how things happened, I told her honestly. But I'm not sad about who we're becoming. So here's what I want to ask you, wherever you're watching this. What would you have done in that moment when betrayal was standing in your living room, demanding you leave? Would you have begged? Would you have fought? Would you have walked away with your head high, trusting that truth has a way of revealing itself? Here's what I learned that Christmas: power doesn't always announce itself. Strength doesn't always look like fighting back. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to let someone else's betrayal define your worth. My husband looked at me and saw someone who would always be fine, so he felt justified in leaving. What he never understood was that being capable of surviving doesn't mean you deserve to be abandoned. It just means you're strong enough to build something better. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, if you've ever had to walk away from someone who couldn't see your value, subscribe for more stories that reveal the strength hidden behind silence. Because the truth is, the most powerful people in the room aren't always the ones talking the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who walked through fire and came out holding their children's hands, ready to build something new from the ashes. Comment below, what would you have done? I'll be reading every single one.